Liz Cheney's pressure group put out a new Be Afraid video today, trying to make it seem like the prospect of moving prisoners from Guantanamo potentially to a maximum security prison in Michigan that closed at the end of last month is something that horrible politicians are trying to force on this unwilling little town in Michigan. It should be noted that in the reality-based community, it was actually the town itself, the city council in Standish, Michigan, that voted unanimously to request to the federal government that Guantanamo prisoners be sent there. They want to keep the prison open. They want to keep those jobs. The city manager, in fact, told reporter Amanda Erickson for the Plum Line today that Ms. Cheney's video is, quote, certainly not representing the views of our community. The city manager denounced the video as fearmongering. Fearmongering? Cheney? On terrorism? Media Matters today also released a long montage of one trope in conservative media that's getting more and more use recently as a way of ratcheting up the be afraid factor.
Get ready to get gang raped again, folks.
You know, pretty much raping the pocketbooks of the rich to give to the poor.
Obama said, you get up there and you rape them.
They're going to rape us. They're going to bend us over and nail us, and there's not a damn thing we can do about it.
People in New York, you're being raped by your government. Raped.
Obama is raping America. Obama is raping our values. Obama is raping our democracy.
He's like a lot of other dictators. He's got the private sector, and he thinks it's always going to be there to be raped.
We're the young girl saying, no, no, help me, and the government is Roman Polanski.
That is the second time that I've seen that last clip, and both times I have felt unwell. This is some of how movement conservatives and the conservative media are trying to shape the climate in which we do politics now. Back with us, former New York Governor Eliot Spitzer, Air America correspondent Anna Marie Cox, and 538.com's polling expert Nate Silver. Thank you for sticking around. Anna Marie, this Media Matters treasury of rape references in conservative media, all of those were from 2009. Media Matters had put out a longer montage that included some older references as well. Those were just the 2009 ones. Is this just conservative media going for it on the psychological fear activation stuff, or is there something more complex going on here?
Well, I think they're going for it on fear activation stuff, but I don't think we can let this montage pass without noting that they're saying this about a black man. And that there's a racial tension here that I find repulsive. I mean, it's the second time I've seen that too, and it's stomach turning. And it's horrifying that this is part of our national discourse, and we can't let it be. I think the good news is I don't think you win elections with that kind of talk. I really don't. The bad news is I do think you get extremists riled up. You may not win an election, but you may get some, wacko out there angry enough to do violence. And it will be on their heads.
Nate, the common political wisdom is that politics of fear, mostly around terrorism, but some around war and other things, worked for Republicans in 2002 and 2004, didn't necessarily work for them in 2006 and 2008. I think it's clear that the conservative movement thinks it can work for them again in 2010. Is the common wisdom here accurate?
Well, I think if you look at what changed between 2004 and 2008, you didn't have all the national security votes for McCain. I mean, that made a big difference. Maybe a 5-point difference, 5-point swing all by itself. I think they're making a mistake talking about terrorism and trying to drum up fears on that issue. I think kind of the tipping point was maybe during the Republican debates when you had Rudy Giuliani characterized as kind of a noun, a verb, and 9/11. I think after that people were like, this is still something we worry about, especially here in New York. We think about it, but not something which is at the forefront of our minds. But there's a lot of fear-mongering in other areas with respect to death panels in the health care bill, with respect to climate change, with respect to everything pretty much.
Socialism!
Are we having a rational debate, or are we just kind of having a shouting match? And emotions play a very powerful short-term role. I'm worried as Democrat about 2010. In the long term, maybe not. But I don't know. Part of this is up to Obama, too, who promised to change the discourse. Maybe one of the disappointments is that he hasn't really. You still have the same kind of rhetoric coming from the right. And someone has to be there and say, this is not okay, guys, to make references like rape when you're talking about economic policy.
Is there an effective anti-fear counterpoint on national security, terrorism, and these other issues?
I think what the president should try to do is rise above it and be that wonderful calming voice that he was with respect to race. at that pivotal moment in the campaign when he gave his race speech, I think he changed the conversation. He can do the same thing to both the imagery and the conversation about terrorism, and he could use the decision about the trial civilian court in New York City, and say, look, we did this because this is what we believe in. This is how we've succeeded. We are doing everything we can about terrorism, but you don't need to use that rhetoric. And I agree with Anna. I think that this is a matter of the right-wing radio crazies appealing to their base. You don't get 50+1 that way. You don't appeal to the centrist, middle-of-the-road voters who want calm and something more affirmative and comforting than the anger that it clearly pervades that right argument.
One of the real buttons, obviously, for this issue recently has been the Khalid Sheikh Mohammed trial being scheduled for New York City. Governor David Paterson of New York says that it was not a decision that he would have made. He's your successor as governor. How do you feel about it?
I'm with the president on this, I think, and with the attorney general. And interestingly, that there was a very good column, I thought, by Jim Comey, who was the deputy attorney general under President Bush, in today's Washington Post, where he didn't come out quite and say, I agree with it, but he said, look, this is a rational decision. This is the right place for the trial. It should be a civilian trial. It proves that our rule of law remains intact, supreme. We will prove the case. He will be sentenced properly. And, yeah, there'll be some additional security costs. The federal government will pick them up. That is what we stand for.
Okay. Nate Silver, Anna Marie Cox, Elliot Spitzer, stay right where you are. Thank you again.